Today this model can be used to predict many things. This is how racism spreads as pandemia. This is how conspiracy theories proliferate. This is a K-pop band sandbox for fan armies.
Good evening and welcome to another episode of Voice TV. Our tonight's guest is Hito Steyerl, visual artist, documentary filmmaker, author, essayist, professor at the University of Arts in Berlin. Her work deals mainly with technology and technological impacts of our lives. She also, in her work, talks about, in a way, presents labor conditions and the way artists work and present their work. And she also, in her work, deals with all the issues concerning the work and how it is in a way related to all the social conditions and the political conditions. This short clip that we just watched is from her recent exhibition, I Will Survive, and it is called Social Sim, as in social simulation. And I would like to welcome Hito to our show and then start our talk.
Hello. Hello. Hello from Berlin. It's really terribly hot. My brain is boiling.
Yeah,
let's try our best.
Yeah, it's the same here. It's like above 40 degrees. And so yes, I started with this video that that I watched a piece of. I would really love to see the exhibition, but with the COVID and everything, traveling is not so much an option today. But it's great that you had this big exhibition and some of your works. This one also is in a way concerning some themes of the COVID crisis. And I really like this social simulation because it in a way reminded me of all the social choreographies that we were supposed to do during the pandemic, like with the social distancing, wearing the masks. And I think a lot of us, in a way, had to reflect all the social choreographies that we have been, in a way, doing during our lives and mostly during the pandemic. So I want to ask you first if you can tell us a little bit about this piece and how you spent the pandemic and what were your thoughts during this whole thing that has been happening to us for the last year and a half.
Yeah, thanks so much. I mean, the social sim is actually a real social sim. It is based on a real social simulation. So it is a simulation of an infectious process, which is running live. And some kind of entity in my video, it's a dancing mania, is infecting people. And then they start emanating laser flashes and disintegrate after a while. But the idea was that it's not only about a possible infectious disease, but mainly about infectious information, about the, spread of fake news, of conspiracy theories, and all of these kinds of things that I was trying to articulate. We also adapted a second social simulation, which is called Rebellion, which is a real scientific simulation whereby basically it's a riot control simulation. You try to influence the crowd so as not to riot too much. You put the heads of the rebellion in jail. You lower their grievance parameters, and so on and so on. So I have looked during the pandemic into these algorithmic tools to model, control, and influence populations. I think that's the main thing I have done, but also with the idea that even if social choreographies became pretty visible during pandemia, they were there all along, right? All sorts of algorithmic influencing. Let's think back, for example, of the Cambridge Analytica case where data was scraped off Facebook and became very instrumental in orchestrating Brexit, for example. This kind of social choreography has been going on all along, and people were just not really noticing it. So I said, okay, obviously we are dancing to some kind of tune. So at least let's visualize it. Let's make it clear. Maybe one can change the choreography while we're at it.
Yeah, that's also what I was thinking about, because of course today we're completely aware that we are that the internet is not a free space, and you also talked in one of your talks about this third stage of the web, where we are obviously aware that we are not in a free space, but we are in a way still using it, and also trying in a way to decentralize it, and trying to in a way catch some kind of data sovereignty, and to make some different kind of platform cooperations. But we are still stuck in this very unfree space of the internet, and still stuck in these in a way social choreographies that we, I think, cannot still escape. Do you think that there is some kind of maybe I don't know, a way to hijack the internet and to use the internet for a greater cause, which I know you are using it in your artwork, but do you think that the artists should do something more than just realize the problem? Do you think that in a way we can do something to maybe solve it a little bit?
Well, I think from the artist point of view, it's really a tall task, to ask artists to fix something. Basically, privatization, which has been going on more or less since the internet exists, or at least since the early 2000s, very, very massively, when basically a space which before was sort of a military, industrial, academic entity, the internet, the early internet, was privatized and ended up being monopolized by 5 corporations. It's about like asking artists to take back all of the territories that were privatized since, let's say, 1989. This would be more or less the same thing. But having said that, I think obviously, that's the very urgent task, to try to regain some kind of sovereignty over at least some parts of communication by trying to build as much communicational infrastructure as possible, but also applying as much as possible power, institutional pressure, on whoever can do anything. For example, I don't know, nation states, the EU, to improve this state of things and to oppose the monopolization of the internet by a few big corporations.
Yes, and I was also thinking a lot during this COVID situation, because we have been so much on the internet and using the internet so much, and in a way, I thought at one point that we would be we would stay on the internet forever, like all the things that we have been doing in the art world. They just switched to the internet. I work in theater, and I really thought at one point that theater would stop existing, which didn't happen, of course. But I thought that, okay, now there's this new reality that we have to conquer, because I don't know why and I don't know how, but we have just been in a way put inside it, and now we have to see what we should do about it. And then with these new technologies like AI and like I don't know, you know about the GPT-3. I think a lot of our occupations will be run in a couple of years by robots and by AI. And this program now can be like a copywriter instead of copywriters. It can make music instead of musicians. And I know that it seems like some kind of a utopia, dystopia, not a utopia. And I think that at some point I'm imagining this brave new world in which robots and AI are doing things instead of us, but not in a good way, not like in a Star Trek way, but more like in a way where this power is still in the hands, as you said, in the hands of corporations. Sometimes I think that maybe we're a little too late to do something about it, but yeah, I think now is the proper moment to maybe, if we can, question it in a way.
Yeah, as you said, it's maybe too late. That's entirely possible, But definitely automation is also something that is entering all the creative professions big time now. And we thought we were sort of safe because we thought these activities cannot be automated so easily. And also they cannot be automated entirely easily until now. That's also the case. But looking at what something like GPT-3 can do, it's quite impressive, I mean, from the point of view of the corporation that developed it, it's in fact quite advanced. So the thing that I keep saying about automation is that people, keep obsessing around the very smart AI, the general artificial intelligence, which is going to rule the world and, start controlling everything and so on, and is omnipowerful and omnipresent, that may or may not exist. At the moment, I don't really care, but the thing that definitely exists are all these small, stupid automation apps or programs or bots running in the background, which by trying to automate away labor, create a whole lot of confusion and just recreate professions in a precarious way. I mean, if you look around on the streets here in Berlin, the amount of people on bikes who are delivering things has, completely gone through the roof during pandemia. And they are all basically socially choreographed, if you like, by these kind of surveillance apps that extract their labor force, so to speak. So I think if the real political efficacy of these apps of automation, also to some part artificial intelligence and so on, is in these rather small and not very glamorous applications, which are already changing the landscape of labor, but also daily life a lot.
Yes, and as you said, these bicycles are also here in Belgrade running everywhere. And I also sometimes think, because I walk my dog during the night, and they are really like, there's a lot of them during the night delivering food. And sometimes I really think that they're like robots, because they're not paying attention to anybody. They just get this like application and they just go like, I really can't. At some points, I'm imagining that they just, are going straight to their destination, not looking if they're going to, go through somebody or, do anything, make some kind of an accident or whatever. And I was also thinking about all these smart apps and the automation of life. The first the smartphones, then smart homes, and then smart cities, and all the social relations
Yep.
that are in a way also becoming like smart. And they were also there to make our lives easier, but they didn't make our lives easier. They just made them in a way more complicated, because now we have to conquer the freedom that we had maybe 10 years ago, but we don't have it now. Um,
Yeah, it made life more confusing, because no, you have to solve, all kinds of troubleshoot on download, update, whatnot, and you're basically your own tech support all the time, but it doesn't really work because you always need the latest version, which of course you cannot even buy it, you have to rent it, but if you stop renting it, you have to not have access to your projects anymore. So it's very confusing, but also mentioning the smart city, this is where it really morphs also into the urban 3D reality, also into real estate. The smart city as an idea, as a neoliberal utopia, is usually some kind of slogan that advertises a private gated city which is fully controlled, which is fully surveilled, in which all the data are networked, maybe run with a sort of special cryptocurrency and blockchain and so on. So basically all this tech sloganeering is deployed in the service of creating private cities, right? And taking away cities from the kind of urban governance mechanisms, democratic mechanisms, sometimes, for examples, even, and trying to run cities as corporations, as data corporations, as surveillance corporations, and so on.
Yes, and as you mentioned that, I would love for us to see a short excerpt of your video called "How Not to Be Seen" from 2013. It in a way talks about what we mentioned. Yeah, so let's see it and then.
There are 13 ways of becoming invisible by disappearing. Living in a gated community. Living in a military zone. Being in an airport, factory or museum. Owning an anti-paparazzi handbag. Being fitted with an invisibility cloak. Being a superhero. Being female and over 50. Surfing the dark web. Being a dead pixel. Being a Wi-Fi signal moving through human bodies. Being undocumented or poor. Being spam caught by a filter. Being a disappeared person as an enemy of the state. Eliminated. Liquidated. And then dissimulated.
In the decades of the digital revolution, 170,000 people disappear. Disappeared people are annihilated, eliminated, eradicated, deleted, dispensed with, filtered, processed, selected, separated, wiped out. Invisible people retreat into 3D animations. They hold the vectors of the mesh and keep the picture together. They re-emerge as pixels. They merge into a world made of images.
It reminded me, you remember Second Life?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
It just disappeared at some point. I don't know how, because I thought that Second Life would be like something we would be playing forever, that it would exist forever. It really looked like people could go to a perfect world that they could never afford to live in, be things that they could never afford to be, buy things that they could never afford to buy, because it had also, I think, like Prada shops. You could buy artificial Prada shoes, but it disappeared. It probably still exists, but it doesn't have so many users. And when I was watching this piece of yours, I was reminded by the Second Life and like these eliminated people going to another place where they become 3D animations.
Yeah. I was wondering. It used to be a trope in these kind of real estate advertisement renderings that there would be these silhouettes, right? Like half transparent silhouettes. And so why? What is this? Why? Okay, I understand it's cheaper if you render them like that, but who are they representing actually? It was my idea that this is where the disappeared people end up, they end up at this kind of render ghosts. That's the technical term in these kind of real estate advertisement simulations.
Yes, and is there a chance that we can not be seen today? Because this is a piece from 2013, and it is like some kind of uh, you call it a fucking didactic educational mock file, and you have it is in a way a homage to Monty Python and their piece called how not to be seen. So what was your idea behind it, and what would you say that happened to us replacing ourselves with our own ghosts, as you want to say? What happens today?
Well, I mean, the whole thing is just a meditation on the question of visibility, right? How to be in control over how visible you are and to whom. And is there any way to control that as well? So it's a sort of YouTube tutorial of how not to be seen, how to become invisible in 5 steps. But of course, you never really manage to become invisible unless sometimes you do. Sometimes whatever you do, no one is going to see it. Even if it's performed in full daylight, you can be completely invisible and no one is going to take you into account, just because people have decided that for some reason this is not relevant. This is sort of filtered from view. I was referring to undocumented people or something like that. I mean, it's not that these things are not available to eyesight, right? They are socially filtered out and made invisible. So basically, the whole field of visibility is a field that's deeply imbued, of course, by politics. But in a way, the main, let's say, reflex to these questions of visibility in political theory has always been, oh, we need to make everything and everyone visible, visibility for everyone and so on. And of course, if you bring in surveillance, that's maybe not an entirely uncontroversial way to go, because there's also things that you do not want to be seen by everyone, right? There is also people who do need to stay undercover and under the radar, and that cannot be seen at any point in time. That's there. That I was literally, I mean, one of the, just to make it more concrete, right? One of the stories I was starting from, which is never articulated in the film, was the story of some of my friends in the Kurdish mountains who were there as guerrilla, and they were telling me the story of the drone library. So what is the drone library? Drones started flying over the territory, started scouting for people hiding in the mountains and trying to make them visible via heat-seeking technology. So they got used to it. They took along some kind of plastic bag, and whenever a drone came, they drenched themselves in water so as to bring down the body temperature and become invisible to the drone. They were only invisible to the drone. Every human eye would have seen them, I guess. But then something really interesting happened, because they all had books for that purpose, because they knew that for some amount of time they wouldn't be able to move. So they brought along their books, and whenever the drone was flying, they had time finally to read the books. So there was a whole range of books that I call the drone library, the books that became visible while those people were hiding from drones. And if you start from this kind of, story, then the question of visibility and invisibility becomes much more complex than just saying, oh, everyone needs to be visible at all times, regardless of conditions.
Yes, and also some things are supposed to be visible, and they, in a way, become invisible to us. And I think it's also a matter of power of who can see things. Like
Yes.
some of us can, who is watching us in a way, because me and you, we cannot surveil people, but somebody else can surveil us and have these data, and we are visible to them, but they are not visible to us. And for me, it's a very interesting topic, because you also talk a lot about video games and the game theory of playing games and the visibility in the game playing, like and I think that video games are more than ever something that is a part of our reality, becoming a part of our reality.
Yeah, in all different, on all kinds of different levels. But if we just go to the technological level, then I think games are, of course, programmed as social simulations. They reward certain behaviors, they nudge certain behaviors. With other behaviors, you get killed. So it's basically training machines for training some kind of idea of what one should achieve in the game. And in many games, it's not really so different from the assumptions that people have about what people want, how they should behave, that they should win a game, for example, that a game is won when you killed so and so many people. A game is won when you reaped so and so many rewards. A game is won when you, achieved the desired amount of health points and so on. So these assumptions about what a human should be are not so different from economical assumptions about humankind, like the Homo economicus, who is always he's always acting in his own self-interest. Always has a complete transparent information about anything else that's going on in the world, and will always act to his own benefit. So basically, these kind of assumptions, I think, are also hardwired into many video games, and there are not many video games which would privilege a way of being in a video game which would recompensate something like solidarity, for example, or empathy or collaboration. These are not necessarily goals that are being programmed for in video games. So I think these video games mainly, no, not all of them. There's also very, very interesting video games are programmed as a kind of training ground, you know, to compete within the existing economy.
Yes, and then we also have, like I remember always the Collateral Murder video that resembles in a way a video game. It looks like a video game, and I think that is the part where reality and fiction become so much overlapped in a way. You cannot understand that it's real, that these American soldiers are really killing these innocent people like they are in the video game. So I think that the minds also, by playing these lots of social choreographies, not of course just video games, but also other social choreographies, for them, they start acting like they are in a video game, and this becomes completely normal to them in a sense.
Yeah, what kind of behavior do games optimize for? That's an interesting question, you know, and how does this correspond to uh, abilities that might be useful, you know, within the current world?
Yes, and also what I don't know. I'm thinking a lot about this universal basic income that it's like an experiment happening now in some of the developing countries. I saw that they're having it in the US now. And I was also thinking that is it going to happen at some point that when all of the things that we work become automated, that we will not have anything to do, and now that they're realizing how to give us some kind of a basic income for not doing anything. But then I thought, okay, we're not going to do anything. We are going to sit at home and be on our devices, and we will be actually working for the Google or the other corporations by not working, but we will be working for them, because
Yeah,
I can imagine people in some countries like I don't know where they had this experiment of giving this basic income to people. It was Canada, America, and I think Denmark. I can't imagine people there not doing anything and receiving money. They will probably be on some kind of a, I don't know,
Netflix.
Netflix, some kind of devices, and yeah, and then their behavior will probably be measured by some kind of parameters, and they will see. So yeah, I think that what you said, that we are in a way replacing ourselves with our own ghost, is already happening in a way.
Yeah, I mean that's a fascinating thing for me about Netflix, or it's not all of these big also entertainment data corporations. They create basically a sort of profile of yourself, right? Facebook has a profile of yourself or what it thinks you are, but it belongs to Facebook. It's like in the story of Oscar Wilde about Dorian Gray. You know, there is a painting of Dorian Gray somehow in the attic, and it doesn't age. And somehow Facebook has your own portrait in its data server somewhere, and it probably ages or something, but it belongs to them. And you have no, first of all, you don't know what it looks like, but it's being sold on not only on the black market but on the advertisement market. So your data profile is being traded, sold, leased. But you have just, you don't even know what it is, you know, what it contains, what it consists of. You have just zero control over it.
Yes, and there's also one interesting thing that you can also sell your own body for a video game now, actually, and it's really cheap, and people are doing it. You go to a studio where they take like
Ah,
yeah, they
they scan you. Scan.
they scan you, yeah,
Mhm.
and then you are. I think that you have to be naked, probably, and
Mhm.
then they make an avatar out of you, and you can
Mhm.
sell it on the internet. But it's very interesting that you sell it for a really a small amount. It's like $80 or something like that, and a lot of
Mhm.
students are doing it and selling it to these video game, I don't know, companies that then make avatars out of these people, and when
Mhm.
they sell you, they can use you for how long they want. It's not like limited. You just sell yourself and you go out and you have no idea what will happen. I think the only thing you sign in the contract that they're not going
Mhm.
to use you for any kind of pornography,
Wow.
but they
Yeah.
can use it for any kind of like video games.
Yeah, I mean, in a larger scope, I think we are in a very similar period to when the first land registries were invented, before people were on the land and the land was around them, and it probably didn't really occur to them that land could be split up and divided into real estate and then become private property. And if anyone would, ask them to sign a contract, they would just sign it because they would say to themselves, okay, I mean, what is he talking about? How can land be a property? And now we are in a similar period, but with data, right? Most people click terms and conditions every day, and they have no idea what's in them, and they think, "I cannot be so bad because what are they going to do with these data anyway? I mean, what does it mean, my data as private property, and whose private property? What are they even talking about, right?" So I think we're in this period of capture, new capture, enclosure of digital space, enclosure of, your data, because people don't really know the kind of things that can be done out of composite big data. So it's really interesting because there is a sort of data serfdom. I mean, I'm exaggerating now. I'm just talking to myself because I'm really interested now in the question of serfdom. No, how did it come about? What does it mean? How is it tied to the land? How does anyone start having property over you? I'm not talking about slavery. That's a bit extreme serfdom, right? And I'm trying to think about how this relates to the capture of private data now. Is there something like a digital serfdom happening right now in these territories?
Yeah, and it's also very interesting how I think now even people are not realizing what is happening to their data, and I don't think that anyone is thinking about it on a daily basis. Like what you were saying, like I know myself. I click this. I agree, and I'm not a robot. And I'm also thinking of a world where they're going to ask that you have to click I'm not a human, like after a while, and I think that we are still not looking at the internet as a place. We are looking at it as a machine, as a tool,
Mhm.
but I think it's becoming a place and we're not aware of it. What you were saying, about property, because when you have a land, okay, it's a land, it's a property, you can sell it, but I don't think that people are still aware that the internet is also becoming some kind of a property, and that everything that we do on the internet and every data we give, every behavior we do on the internet is in a way um, something that is real. I think that this reality of the internet is something that we should also discuss.
Yeah. And this has become very clear during pandemia when so many people were forced in such a short time, to suddenly jump online, do their meetings and conference and whatnot online. They were forced into these enclosures, you know, because there weren't a lot of alternatives around and still are not around, right? So you enter this territory and immediately you are on someone's land. I mean, I call it land now, forced to perform certain services for free. You're working for free all the time, even if you don't realize it. So all of these are new property relation in this kind of techno-feudalism we seem to have entered, which are entirely interesting to me and which also reconfigure, in my view, you know, the whole idea of human rights, of property, over what does it extend? Where is the necessary extension of digital rights, digital personal rights, you know, sovereignty over your own data, control over how it is being utilized, filtered, aggregated, and so on.
Yes, and what happens also with our behavior? What will happen to our behavior in the future? Because I think that all of these technologies are more and more influencing our behavior, and that we are not aware of it at all. You know, that we are in a way in using this, thinking that we are using the technology, but I think that the technology is also using us in return more and more.
No, it's a training. It's
Yeah.
a training, right? If you have a device, your device is training you to a certain rhythm, schedule, to divide your priorities, divide your attention, and so on and so on.
Yeah, I would like us to see another short excerpt from your piece. This is the future from 2019.
Yeah.
This is Hedja.
ناظم هجاية.
She will only appear later in the video.
أزيدنا الفيديو ده.
This is a prediction of what she will look like.
نتورك كهران تخمين تكبر زي شاوة. ليه أزنزان بس قالوا بيبور.
This is the immediate future. I am a neural network. This is what I see. I can see one fraction of a second into the future. My predictions are based on extreme probability. In a second, something like a fish will wobble around the screen. See, I told you it would happen. In the future, fish will have no heads and there is water all over. And over water, it kind of looks like this. In this landscape, Hedja is looking for something. And this is how the story will start.
So this is how the story will start, and how will it end?
Yeah, good question. I think it is the screen becomes transparent actually in the end. That's what happens. Yeah, but this is a film that is almost entirely made with neural networks that are able to predict the next frame in a video. So they are literally able to predict the future in a video. So whatever we see is always one frame in the future. 0.04 seconds into the future. I was super fascinated because everyone, of course, wants to look into the future, right? And now an artificial intelligence is able, you know, to give us that look into the future. But of course, the future is really, really blurry and you don't exactly know what's going on in there. It becomes like a like a Rorschach test almost or something. The future is very, very watery, and also it's not very accurate either,
Yeah, but
because it's entirely based on past data, you know. So the future becomes just a mirroring of the past, you know, into the future. It's already colonized by past data. But I was experimenting with this algorithm for a very long time and trying to tease out its possibilities.
yeah, because I was thinking this AI, well, it's becoming smarter and smarter, and I think in the last year it became really, really smart, and I'm a little bit afraid of it at this point. Are you sometimes afraid of the AI? Because I think that now when you were experimenting with it, I think it was one kind of a machine, but I think it's much, much smarter now in 2021.
There is different, you know, models. So GPT-3, the one you mentioned, the one that is able to complete sentences, is quite frankly stunning. I always enter Hito Steil's new book about vernacular images is, and then GPT-3 writes the book, and I go, whoa, that's very scary. But why is there so much advertisement in my book? Okay. So it's not very perfect either, but it knows a lot of things, and it has an uncanny feeling for a tone of writing. So that's very surprising. But in the visual, I have to tell you, it's not as advanced really. There is many different reasons why, because the process is much more complicated, blah blah blah, and so on. But it's still pretty well. Basic is not the correct word, but it's not really very much advanced yet. But it will come, you know. It will
Yeah,
come.
I also think. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's good with the language, and I think it's very good with music. It can play good music. It's even very good with poetry.
Yeah,
So it can
poetry.
be, yeah, and it can be, and I think it's becoming lucid in a way. I think it's becoming really, really smart and funny. It's I don't know if I'm a big fan of the Sophie the robot, and I have been watching her since she has been developed, you know, and she's becoming funny, and she can joke, and she can really joke with you, and I think that it's becoming like some kind of a science fiction what robots can do.
Yeah, but we also have to mention, I mean, who does she belong to? What kind of vision of Saudi techno-futurism is she propelling? What kind of idea of technology slash autocracy slash theocracy is she advertising through her presence? You know, what kind of projects like the city of Neom, which is basically ripping a proposal that the Italian designer group Super Studio made in the 70s to build a city in a straight line for 100 kilometers. So that's now being realized as some kind of feudal Freeport, feudal AI Freeport. Let's face it, right? And we have robots like Sophia fronting these kind of projects.
Yeah, of course, because
Yeah.
of course the technology reflects the society. It can't be anything else. And who
Yeah.
has the money to build the robots? Of course, the corporations. And but it really is, in a way, it's fascinating. It's really scary, and it really. I don't know. I think sometimes. So what is future going to look like in, I don't know, 10 years time, 20 years time? What do you think?
Well, I mean, the recent past has shown us that the future is pretty unpredictable. And the most unpredictable thing is, even if something like a pandemic is being predicted, then people are still like, oh, no, that's not going to happen. You know? So even if I could predict the future, no one would believe me. And that's the one thing. The other thing, and that's also something that's being mentioned in This Is the Future, is that the more you try to predict the future, try to hedge against the risks, try to predict all the risks and then to preempt them, the more the future, the present gets destabilized. Because in the present, you install all these mechanisms to control the future. But then the present itself gets completely unpredictable and fucked up, right? So in a way, the more the future is predicted, the less predictable the present becomes. And honestly, I mean, what's going on in 10 years? No one knows. But in terms of the techno-imaginary that's emerging, it's pretty dark, right? I mean, the advanced technologies like, I don't know, space travel or cryptocurrency or all these kinds of things are now captured in basically figures that resemble medieval crazy kings, right? Like Elon Musk for me is Richard III or some kind of mad Shakespeare king, right? And these guys are now basically seen as the pinups, the vanguard, the spearhead, of advanced technology. And this has changed a lot, from the previous techno imaginary, which was supposed to be transparent, was supposed to be slightly progressive, had this kind of Star Trek appeal and some kind of universalism to it. So now this has completely been replaced by some kind of Game of Thrones imaginary around AI, around all these very advanced technologies.
Yes, and it's also, I think in our spheres, like in art, it's also becoming a problem. Well, it's always been a problem, but now even more with this financing and sponsorships and privatization. I think, of course, it's not a thing that has been happening recently. It's been happening for a while now. But what I love about your work is that you always reflect this part also. You're not like making a piece and putting it into a museum and not looking where you're putting it and where the money comes from. And some of your work, you can tell us a little about that. You also realized that some of your shows were financed by arms companies, and then you of course talked about it. You're very transparent about where the money comes from, and I'm always thinking about, can we as artists really know who is really financing us at the end of the day, and what is your type of battle against this? You had this piece called "Is the Museum a Battlefield?" Where you talked about how the arms companies finance the world of contemporary art. So I just wanted to ask you how you deal with all these problems that we have while we are working on something.
Yep. I mean, I try my best to reflect it. Sometimes it's also really not possible, because you very quickly enter a sort of maze of shell companies and, people fronting stuff you really don't know what is going on really behind the scenes. So it's not always possible, right? But in, I think, the last 20 years, and I mean, for much longer, art has been used for reputation washing of basically any sort of interest. We had so many types of washing in the last years. There was greenwashing, of course, there was pink washing. Now there's a lot of diversity washing going on. So basically companies or corporations trying to clean up their reputation by investing in seemingly progressive art art projects, be it exhibitions, biennials, individual projects, and so on and so on. And of course, it's very, very frustrating to get implicated in these kind of deals again and again, even without my knowledge, without my consent. It's really sometimes like this terms and conditions things on the internet. You get into something and there is almost, it becomes very difficult to find out what kind of interests are in play. But I should write a taxonomy, right, of the different kinds of washing that are going on in art right now. Very big now in Germany, for example, is the oil and gas sector washing. So basically pipeline interests are being decorated with art projects and so on and so on.
So when you get a commission, do you, when you realize that it has been financed by some, I don't know, oil company or army company or whatever, what do you do?
Yeah, it happened to me. It happened to me once. So I've become much better in trying to see what's coming in advance. So it usually doesn't happen, but it happened once. So me and my colleagues, we were invited to a show, which was not unproblematic from the start, but to say, okay, we said we will try. And at the opening day, on the opening day, 2 days before the opening date, we were sent the invitation cards and they listed the name of one of Germany's biggest weapons manufacturers as main sponsor. And this is something which is very, very unusual, I have to say. It's very, very unusual. It doesn't really normally happen. So in this case, we were really tricked, but then we very quickly sort of organized and at least made it public and stated that openly. This was more or less the only thing we could do at that point in time, because in a way it was already too late. So since this experience, I've become pretty more cautious, way more cautious about that.
Yeah, so you have to be a detective also, not just an artist.
Yeah, but on the other hand, it's also interesting, you know, it leads you into sectors of society you didn't even know existed, right?
Yes, and you also incorporate the thing in your art, like every time you figure out something like that is happening, you will probably, that will also be a part of your art, because your art are not just the installations that you make and the films you make, but also the essays that go with it, also your talks, your lecture performances. So it is in a way integrated in the whole thing.
Yeah, I have one ongoing work, little one, which deals with this kind of cases. So at one point, I sold a work and I realized it has gone into a free port. Okay. It's not terrible money, it's handbag money. Okay. But the work is in a free port and I didn't really want to keep the money. So I invested it in 2 tons of horse shit. And the horse shit was composted. I donated it to a Berlin community garden. They had a lot of compost for a very long time. And we made this project where we created planters in the shape of free ports, Geneva Freeport and Panama. And we called these planters free plots and always filled them with horse shit compost, you know, from Freeport proceedings, and give them to community gardens in different places where I do my shows, where they plant their things and also tell their stories. And recently I have started to photograph all these different plants and flowers and train a new artificial intelligence on the new sort of herbarium, which has grown, you know, already from this method of liberating resources from free ports, composting them, and transferring them to free plots. So in my view, one should compost the whole alt world like that, right?
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
compost the thing and just grow everything anew.
That would be a perfect model, new model. I have a question from the audience for you.
Yeah.
What's your best recommendation for a revolutionary information platform?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I think one has to really, because there's now several layers of information platforms, right? There's still the Web 1 internet, basically the blog sphere. Not sure how far one can go with that. I think the Web 2 is already foreclosed. You know, this app world has already been privatized and divided up into these techno-feudal fiefdoms. So in my view, there is not a lot of chance on this sector to, you know, create alternative social media and so on. Many people have tried. It has not worked until now. So now people are trying on Web3, creating DAOs and, you know, different kinds of governments, experiments. Let's put it like that. We have to see how this one goes. I'm pretty undecided about that, but at the moment, you know, whatever is not in the, you know, big five fiefdoms is already something if it manages to create a network to other, you know, smaller platforms.
And also another question, will the Pompidou exhibition, the I Will Survive exhibition, travel to other countries?
Yeah, that will travel to Holland a bit later. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We're going to play at the end of our talk an excerpt from The Factory of the Sun from 2015. Yeah, it is in a way, I don't know, a piece that talks about how we can resist the age of surveillance. Can you tell us a little bit about the piece? And then, yeah, I would like to end the talk with this video.
Okay, super. So Factory of the Sun was made in 2015, I think, and it is set in a world where Deutsche Bank has managed to accelerate the speed of light. Why? Because now they can trade even faster on high frequency trading platforms. And additionally, they have set up a motion capture platform where they motion capture dances from all over the world and transform these dances into energy. So they basically capture the motion capture the energy of people, and somehow edited with that is a documentary story really of a programmer and her brother, a YouTube dance star who lives in Canada. Whose family emigrated from the Soviet Union in the 80s and ended up after a long, you know, journey in Canada.
Yes, and so this artificial sunlight that they are creating, is it good or bad?
The artificial sunlight is basically the data extracted from the people, right? It's their life energy that's sort of accumulated by this entity called the Deutsche Bank, who is also the sponsor of the show in which you see this artwork. So there's a lot of different layers going on in there. But I mean, mainly it's a piece which really lives on the wonderful grace and elegance of its main protagonist, you know, the YouTube dancer, Take Some Crime, TSC, who was just giving so much amazing, you know, contribution to this work. And he's a real YouTube star. You can also look him up there, TSC.
And are you working on something new at the moment?
Yeah, we're doing a theater piece with my colleague Mark Waschkirch, who you may see or not also in this excerpt. And we are doing a piece about feudalism in theater and the internet. So we are preparing this right now, talking about the peasant wars, talking about serfdom. He's on stage in armor with a sword and doing laser sword fighting, this kind of thing. So that's what we're working on right
So
now.
theater is a battlefield now.
Yeah, now, yeah, we're done with that. Let's go to theater. No, I'm joking. I don't know.
Okay. So do you have a message to our audience? What is the future for you? How does the future look like? If you could imagine like what will happen in September, what do you think will happen? Because it's the title of our talk, Is This the Future? So is this the future, or do you think in September it will be different than now?
Yeah, in September, of course, the future will be different than it is today. But I think there will be, for good or bad, a sort of revernacularization of everything. And also a retreat, from all these devices, from all these technologies, also from the completely corporatized shopping mall like urban spaces, and that people will start anew with other means and maybe also simpler means.
I would love for this kind of future to happen. Thank you for this nice vision of the future. Thank you so much for being our guest tonight. We will finish off by an excerpt from The Factory of the Sun.
Okay, thank you so much.
It was from here that they intercepted all signals.
At this point in the game, everything flips. It turns out you are your own enemy, and you have to make your way through a motion capture studio gulag. Everyone is working happily, the sun is shining all the time, it's totally awful.
During the Cold War, the NSA built a listening station. It was from here that they intercepted all signals.
Der Vollpfosten von der Deutschen Bank. Ja, du bist doch noch nicht mal beim Bier gekommen, weil ich blond bin und blaue Augen habe, oder?